12 Terrifying Secrets Revealed. The sinister hidden room in my haunted house exposed. Clara's heart raced as she clenched her spray paint can, staring at the peeling wallpaper in her family's old house. This wasn't just any house, it was a relic of nightmares, draped in eerie silence and shadows that seemed to breathe. Whispers echoed through the dimly lit corridors at night, turning her dreams into fearful visions. What secrets lurked within those crumbling walls? What things waited behind the hidden door she felt sure was there, camouflaged among the family's forgotten memories? Each night, the walls seemed to close in, urging her to uncover whatever monstrous truth this house held. Just last week, while cleaning the basement, she had stumbled upon something wrong. A cold sensation prickled her fingers as she pressed against the door that appeared out of nowhere, hidden behind warped wooden panels. The moment she shoved it open, a gust of stale, deathly air rushed out, almost as if the house were exhaling years of buried secrets. She froze, a violent gust that held the weight of despair. Days turned into restless nights filled with frightened murmurs, the shadows inching closer, as if her desperate attempts to fix this house awakened a slumbering evil. Clara blamed her exhausted mind, but deep down, she felt the weight of something sinister lurking in the corners of her home. Outside, the neighbors watched her with watchful eyes, their forced smiles sending chills up her spine. They whispered among themselves, shrouded in secrecy, leaving her feeling like an outsider in the very place she hoped to find solace. Then there was Joe. The local handyman, with his greasy hair and 2 long stares, offered a glimmer of help. Yet with each conversation, an undercurrent of dread pulled at her gut. He lingered longer than necessary, his voice barely above a whisper, hinting at truths he never fully revealed. Clara felt the weight of his secrets press down on her like the dank air of the basement. She should have trusted her instincts and kept her distance, but hope had a way of blinding even the sharpest fears. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. She knew something sinister had crept into her life when the whispers escalated into cries. Her children woke up screaming, clutching their blankets, eyes wide with terror. She swore she heard her name being called from the dark, the shadowed corners of their home, mocking her attempts to create a safe haven. As she rang the police one sleepless night, the officer scoffed, waving off her fears. There's no such thing as ghosts, ma'am. But Clara knew the truth lingered there, behind the hidden door that felt, more and more, like a portal to a waking nightmare. Fear and despair gripped her as she huddled beneath a thin blanket, surrounded by the soft breaths of her children. But the whispers came again, louder this time, rising into a frenetic wail that sent her heart crashing against her ribcage. Standing at the threshold of the hidden room, Clara's hand shook as it brushed the door handle. Whatever secrets were buried inside, she needed to confront them before they swallowed her whole. Just as she was about to turn the knob, a chilling draft swept past her, and she caught sight of that shadow behind her, whispering her name in the dark. Clara's blood ran cold, locking her in place. Would she meet her family's fate, becoming yet another ghost intertwined in the fabric of this house's haunted history? Clara hesitated, breathless, her fingers trembling above the door handle. The whispers echoed in her mind, an unsettling chorus of her name, and the cold air wrapped around her like a chilling embrace. Heart pounding, she felt the weight of the shadows pressing closer, as if they too were drawn to the hidden room's secrets. With a sudden resolve, she grasped the handle and turned it. The door screeched open, revealing an abyss of darkness. This wasn't just a room, it was a void, a space that seemed to devour light. Clara's heart raced. What lay before her demanded a bravery she didn't know she possessed. As she stepped inside, the stale air felt thick, heavy with secrets of the past. The room was barren but for a single, decayed chair in the corner. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, coated in layers of dust and shadows. And yet, as she cautiously moved closer, she realized it wasn't just dust that covered the chair. It was something darker, more sinister, like the remnants of despair clinging to the fabric. Suddenly, a noise made her jump, a low creak from above. Clara's head snapped towards the ceiling, a whisper of movement in the shadows catching her eye. She squinted, trying to make out the figure that had fleetingly crossed the threshold of her vision, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Panic gripped her, forcing her to step back. The door slammed shut behind her with a shuddering thud, reverberating through the eerie silence. Clara spun, pressing her body against the door, heart racing as the reality of her situation crashed down on her. She was trapped. The darkness seeped into her mind, weighing her down with dread as whispers began to circle, a cacophony of voices twisting her thoughts. "Let us in, let us in." The voices danced around her, a swirling mass that suffocated her with fear. She clutched her spray paint can, the only semblance of protection she possessed, and prepared to fight. But what was she fighting against? Clara took a shaky breath, her instincts screaming at her to escape. Rushing back to the chair, she suddenly noticed a glimmer beneath it, a small metal object half buried in the grime. With trembling hands, she pulled it free and gasped as it was revealed to be an ornate, rusted key. "Open the door," the voices hummed hypnotically, melding into one chilling chant. Clara's mind raced. Could this key lead her to freedom? Or was it just another trap? In that moment of panic, she heard the soft patter of tiny feet behind her, the unmistakable sound of her children. She turned, eyes wide, heart clenching as she caught sight of their pale faces peeking through the now slightly open door. But something was off. Their eyes stared back, devoid of warmth, mirroring the shadows swarming around Clara. "Mommy, we need to go home," they said in unison, their voices a haunting echo of the whispers. They stepped through the threshold, joining the darkness, reaching for Clara with hands that seemed to twist and writhe. "No!" Her scream pierced the stillness as she clutched the key tightly. The shadows flickered, and the room around her dimmed like a dying flame. Whatever lurked inside wanted more. Clara's breath quickened. She had to fight through this nightmare. With every ounce of strength, she turned to face the children, desperation flooding her chest. "What happened to you?" The door creaked open wide, allowing the darkness to spill out, and the whispers turned frantic. Join us, join us." Clara's grip tightened on the key as fear gripped her heart. Would she lose them to whatever evil had stolen their souls? As the shadows surged forward, she realized the answer lay not in the key, but in confronting the unimaginable horror that had consumed her family. With one last glance at the twisted faces of her children, Clara knew she wouldn't let them go without a fight. But what if the fight was already lost? The key slipped through her fingers as light flickered from deep within the shadows, casting a grotesque scene across the walls, revealing echoes of her family's last moments inside this haunted sanctuary. "Next time we meet it will be different," the darkness promised, its whispers chilling her blood. Clara's heart sank, as dread wrapped around her once more. She was about to learn that the door she had just opened might be the only way out, but the journey to free her family had only just begun. What would she have to sacrifice in the name of love? With a voice full of terror, she whispered, "What have you done to them?" And the room answered back with a chilling laugh. Clara's world constricted into a tunnel of black despair as the laughter echoed, warping reality around her. The children's pale faces twisted grotesquely in the shadows, their voices merging into a united chant that resonated through the silence. "Mommy, join us." She clutched her spray paint can, her only means of defense against an unseen enemy, battling against the rising tide of fear. They were not her children anymore, they were something else, something hollow, devoured by darkness. Panic tightened around her chest, hot and suffocating. "Get away from me!" Clara shouted, her voice trembling, filled with a force she barely felt. Yet she took a step back, further into the dim room, feeling the cold finish of the walls pressing against her. The children advanced, their movements fluid, unnatural. Shadows clung to them like a second skin, writhing and pulsating. Clara's heart raced, a primal instinct for survival clawing at her gut. She had to remember who they were. She had to save them. "Listen to me," she shouted, her voice cracking. "Don't you remember? I'm your mother." But their faces remained blank, mirroring only the jagged edges of the shadows encircling the room, a hellish distortion of familiarity. The whispers grew louder, swarming around her like angry bees. "Let us in. Join us. Stay forever." In a surge of desperation, Clara turned back to the decayed chair, her instincts driving her. The key lay just in reach, still twinkling amidst the debris. She lunged for it once more, feeling the cold iron scrape against her palm. The shadows hissed, a primal warning vibrating through the room. "Come to us. You cannot escape." Clara's breath came faster, showing her fear like a beacon. Racing against time, she turned the key over in her hands, feeling its weight settle with the finality of doom. What door does this open? She muttered to herself, searching the conclusion in her mind while the darkness moved ever closer. Just then, the floor beneath her trembled, a soft rumbling that sent loose bits of dust and debris cascading from above. Clara felt the ground quaking as if the house itself were alive, hungry for the lives trapped within its walls. "What do you want?" Clara screamed, frustration leaking into despair. The sounds around her shifted, the whispers growing melodious, weaving into a twisted lullaby. "We want you." Abruptly, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Clara turned, heart racing again, as the air thickened, laden with a familiar, sweet fragrance. The scent of home-warmed bread, fresh laundry, her children's laughter all jumbled together, luring her deeper into the night. "Mommy, please!" The chant morphed into a pleading call, their arms reaching out, beckoning her forward. Clara's instincts wavered, clashing with the memories flooding back. Could this be a trick? Or was this a desperate longing for connection? She hesitated. Was this how it began? Was she already becoming a part of this darkness? The shadows coiled around her feet, cold and slick, pulling her slowly toward the center of the room. The children stood there, their once innocent faces now twisted in anticipation. Just a little closer, Mommy Clara felt her will unravel, torn between the horrific reality of the room and the warm, haunting promise of reunion. But every nerve in her body screamed in protest. The whispers grew jubilant, knowing they tugged at her very flesh, their presence intoxicating, poisonous. "No!" she gasped, stepping back. "I want tea. I'll not give in." The moment stretched as the room held its breath. Clara stood frozen, the chilled metal of the key a lifeline in her grasp. What if she didn't just have to escape, but also fight back? What power could the key unlock, and at what cost? As if sensing her determination, the shadows screamed in fury. The laughter sharpened, echoing through the hollow void. Clara understood then that resistance had unleashed an angry force. An unseen battle was raging, and the true war for her children's souls loomed just beyond the looming darkness. With furious uncertainty, she rushed toward the door, clutching the key tighter. Would it save them, or would it chain them forever? And just before she could reach her escape, she felt cold fingers brush against her ankle, anchoring her in place. "Mommy, we wait for you," the shadows hissed, their voices blending into a monstrous threat. The door cracked ominously behind her, as she realized something deeper tied her to this darkness. What had she done to deserve this nightmare? The question lingered in the air like a chilling warning, as Clara braced herself for the consequences of her next move. Clara's heart thundered in her chest. The cold fingers wrapped tighter around her ankle, pulling her back into the void. Panic surged as she turned to confront the faces of her children, wide, empty eyes staring through her as if she were nothing but dust. "Mommy, help us!" They twisted in their skin, shapes that once brought joy now contorted into something grotesque. "Stop!" she shouted, fighting against the grip of fear. Drawing strength from somewhere deep within, she hoisted her foot free and lunged for the door, the key gripping painfully in her palm. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, dark tendrils curling menacingly towards her, pining for dominance. The door loomed before her, splintering wood and rusted hinges whispering ancient secrets. Clara turned the key, her breath caught in her throat. It clicked. The sound echoed like a gunshot, slicing through the abhorrent whispers. The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned. With a frantic push, she swung the door open. A blinding light spilled out, harsh and stark against the encroaching darkness, casting the shadows into sharp relief. They shrieked, voices rising to a pitch that sent her guts spiraling like nails on a chalkboard. "Mommy, don't go!" Their cries shifted, more desperate, as if realizing their hold on her was slipping. Clara hesitated, peering through the doorway. The room beyond was draped in soft light, illuminating a place that felt both foreign and familiar. A panorama of forgotten memories awaited her. She could see herself the younger her baking cookies with those same children, laughter ringing like chimes in the air. "Mommy," they crooned, voices dripping with the sweetness of yesteryear, masking the poison underneath. But a chill ran down her spine. This was an illusion. Pressing against the threshold, she caught her reflection in a warped mirror hanging on the wall. It showed not just her, but the shadows of her children, flickering behind her like sinister flames, always close, always watching. They mirrored her movements, mocking her struggle. Gritting her teeth, she turned back to the room. The shadows lunged forward, clawing at her ankles, whispers growing into a frenzy. "Join us. Stay with us. Forever get off me," Clara cried, shoving the door wide open, the light spilling over her. For a moment, the pressure released. The shadows fell back, howling in frustration. "Mommy!" A child's voice, feeble and cracked, pierced through the darkness. "Please don't leave us, we're scared." Clara's heart twisted as she felt the weight of countless choices gripping her throat. How far had she fallen? Tears burned her eyes. Restlessness danced in her chest like fire, urging her to flee into the light. But could she abandon them? Would she ever see them again? "That isn't even you," she muttered, trembling. You're lost." The words felt cruel, but they were the truth. As she stood there, on the cusp of life and death, she realized the key in her hand was more than a gate opener. It was a pact, a chance to confront the darkness head-on. But what would stepping away from the shadows mean for her children or for her? "Close the door, Mommy!" They shrieked, their voices cracking, filled with fury and desperation. The shadows lunged again, this time enveloping her feet, dragging her deeper into their realm. Clara gripped the key tightly, her resolve solidifying. "No!" she shouted defiantly, "I will not lose you." As if by pure will, she stepped boldly into the light, slamming the door behind her. The sudden silence was deafening. Clara's heart raced. Had she truly escaped? She looked around, the room now bathed in ethereal light, flowers blooming, warmth enveloping her. But in the back of her mind, a deafening echo lingered. They were still there, lingering just beyond the door, waiting. What had she done? Behind her lay shadows that hungered. In front of her, a sunlit illusion. And as she turned, the feeling washed over her like a waking nightmare. Something was still lurking in the light. "Mommy?" Came a whisper from the door, inquisitive, yet chilling. How much longer could she pretend to be safe before the darkness came to claim her once more? Clara's heart thudded erratically in her chest. The sunlight pouring in felt foreign, almost suffocating. She glanced over her shoulder at the closed door, a barrier separating her from the lurking horrors just outside. A low rumble echoed through the room, a sound not unlike the whisper of soft voices rising in an anguished chorus. "Mommy!" the voice from the door urged again, thick with yearning and dread, sending chills crawling up her spine. She fought the urge to turn back, to ensure her children were okay. But she couldn't look. Not yet. With trembling hands, she began to survey her surroundings. The room felt too pristine, too perfect, a lying trap crafted by an unseen hand. Each vase of flowers brimmed with colors that seemed too vivid, the air too sweet, reminiscent of childhood mornings that felt like fairy tales. But she wasn't falling for it. Not when everything felt coated in a layer of unease. "What are you?" Clara whispered to the empty room. Silence answered, but the hair on her arms bristled. Something was watching her. She could feel an unseen gaze, a weight pressing sharply against her back. A shift in the air made her freeze. Something slithered across the edges of her perception, dark tendrils stretching from the corners, flickering shadows that grew bolder in the bright light. Clara's breath quickened. They were testing the seams of the illusion, seeking a crack to shatter her fragile sense of safety. She steeled herself. "I won to be weak," she declared. The shadows recoiled for an instant, as if startled by her defiance. But they were far from defeated. She felt the pressure intensify, a malevolent force that seemed to squeeze the very breath from her lungs. "Mommy!" The voice sounded urgent now, trembling with desperation that punched through her like a dagger. Her instinct to protect surged, battling against the voice of reason that screamed at her to run. It felt wrong, unnatural. But as if the universe could read her thoughts, a crack formed along the doorframe, splintering the perfect light spilling into the room. Darkness oozed in, black as ink, crawling over the floor like a sentient entity. Clara stumbled back, her gaze locked on the crack as it expanded, shadow fingers stretching out, writhing in delight. "We're waiting!" The thonic chorus echoed from the door. "Join us!" She swung her head wildly, searching for an escape. An antique chest laid in the corner, aged wood with intricate carvings. Maybe it held a way out, or perhaps another trap, another layer to the facade. The shadows danced eagerly, sensing her conflict as she approached the chest. Clara gripped the ornate edges and heaved the lid open. Inside, dust spewed forth, revealing trinkets of a past she barely recognized. But amidst them lay something glinting, the same key she used to unlock the door. Her eyes widened in horror. "No!" she gasped, snatching up the key, the metal cool and heavy in her palm. It pulsed with latent energy, and a sense of dread washed over her. What if it didn't just open doors, it bound whatever lay beyond them? She heard the whispers circle again, thick and languid. "You must choose, Clara. Come back to us or remain alone." A rush of wind swept through the room, swirling around her like a tempest, leaving her gasping for air. She could see them now, glimpses of twisted shadows forming a line just behind the door, their faces resembling her children more vividly with each fleeting moment of clarity. And the chest, it creaked ominously, shadows curling outwards. She could hear the chest whispering secrets, dark truths waiting to be uncovered. "Only you can set them free," it coaxed, "or bind them forever." Her breath came in shallow gasps. She was at the precipice of a decision that could alter their fates. The children were there, part of her, yet also lost eternally. "Mommy," they urged again, voices suffocated by darkness, eyes wide and pleading. What would she do? Did the door hold the way back, or did it beckon towards the chaos? There was no time. The shadows were clawing for her, whispering promises that twisted her reality. She must act. But the choice was hers, wrapped in a terrible uncertainty. As she wrestled with the dreadful alternatives, the crack of the door widened just enough. A new voice echoed softly, hauntingly beautiful, tempting her with the possibility of connection. "Clara, don't you remember? What had she forgotten? What was she willing to risk to reclaim what she had lost?" "Clara," the voice cooed, softening into a lullaby, grounding her in a way that made her shiver. What awaited her on the other side, beyond the door? She could feel it pull at her with greater force, the choice pulling tighter. "Are you ready to take the plunge?" the shadows taunted. And with that unsettling question echoing in her mind, Clara stepped toward the darkness, feeling fate twist beneath her feet. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one truth screamed loud and clear: she would have to confront her past to save her future. "Do you dare?" The darkness enveloped Clara as she crossed the threshold, a shroud that whispered promises of reunion amid the chill of dread. She braced herself, heart hammering in her chest, eyes adjusting to a gloom that felt alive, pulsating around her like a sentient fog. "Mommy," the voice echoed again, louder this time and more urgent, like a bell tolling in the dead of night. It reverberated against the walls, a mournful hymn that struck straight to her core. She stumbled forward, each step stirring the shadows that coiled around her legs like serpents. The room beyond was unrecognizable. Flickering candles illuminated the space, casting twisted shapes that danced along the walls. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a bittersweet blend that assaulted her senses. Clara covered her mouth, trying to suppress the gag rising in her throat. In the dim light, familiar faces materialized within the dark, their eyes wide, reflecting fear and something else, something hauntingly familiar. "Help us," they chorused, their words slurred and overlapping. The anguish in their voices spiraled into a cacophony that smeared her reality, and Clara fought back the urge to scream. "Get away from them!" she shouted, heart racing. The shadows lashed out, grasping at her, fingers made of pure night that curled around her wrist. Panic surged through her veins. She was losing control. "Don't listen to her!" A voice grew clear amidst the chaos, the warm timbre of her husband's tone slipping through the suffocating darkness. "It's not real. She is trying to deceive you." "David?" Clara breathed, searching the faces. There he was, but he looked wrong. His smile didn't reach his eyes, it was a mirror of agony clouded by something deeper, something that commanded her to look away. "Lucy and Ethan," Clara turned, urgency propelling her. "Where are they? Are you okay?" The shadows shivered, and Clara felt a pull, a twinge of the darkness that wanted her to succumb. It hummed, beckoning like a dark lullaby. The air seemed alive, swirling around her, rapidly spinning out of control.
"Mommy," came the chilling whisper again, wrapping around her throat like a noose.
Suddenly, a wail broke through the air, a sound that shattered everything.
"Don't let them take you!"
David screamed, his voice cracking with desperation.
Shadows swirled, forming into grotesque shapes, simulating the children's likenesses, their eyes wide, drenched in sorrow.
"Help us," they echoed. Clara bolted towards them, feeling the fabric of reality fray like an old garment, threads coming undone around her. She reached out, fingers grasping for her children, but they vanished, swallowed whole by the grasping void that wanted to claim her.
"Mommy!"
The voices faded into whispers, mere echoes of the past, and the shadows lunged, clinging to her skin, sucking the warmth from her bones.
"No!"
She screamed, fighting against the suffocating mass, gasping for breath. She thought of the key, the symbol of her choices.
What if it could bind these horrors to her? What if it could sever the connection?
With no time to second-guess, she clutched the key tightly, feeling its cold metal bite into her skin.
"I choose!"
Clara yelled, unbound fury spilling from her soul.
"I choose to break the cycle."
She thrust the key forward into the thick darkness swirling around her, the shadows convulsing as if in pain, fighting against her resolve. The ground trembled as the whispers grew louder, desperate to drown out her courage, but Clara pressed on, the shadows screaming, clawing, trying to pull her beneath their twisted embrace.
"You don't control me!" she roared, slamming the key down.
The piercing light burst forth, shattering the remnants of her past, illuminating the dark corners and banishing the figures that haunted her. Clara felt the rush of air as the shadows recoiled, shrieking in terror as they were pulled back into the night, and just like that, silence fell. Breathless and trembling, Clara surveyed the room, torn between relief and creeping unease.
The faces she loved hung in the ether. Would they ever return?
As the darkness receded, one last chilling whisper floated through the air. "Remember, Clara, the past doesn't forget." She staggered back, the weight of those words hanging heavily between hope and despair.
"Will it ever end?" she whispered to the empty room.
The answer drifted like the fading echoes of a nightmare, her heart pounding with dread.
What other truths awaited her in the blinding light of reality?
A flicker of light danced against her closed eyelids, and Clara winced, forcing herself to breathe deeply. Each inhale felt like a betrayal, her body craving the chaos that swirled just beyond the edges of her consciousness.
"Get up!" a voice demanded, not far off.
It was sharp, punctuating the silence like a cracked whip. Clara opened her eyes, confusion crashing over her.
She was still in the room.
The candles now burned evenly, their glow offering an uneasy warmth, yet the air felt different. Charged. As if it had become a solid thing plotting against her. "Mommy," a ghostly whisper curled through the air, slinking around her like a shroud. Once more, she shot to her feet.
This time, it was real.
Feeling the hard ground beneath her, Clara turned, scanning for an escape. Her heart drummed wildly as she stumbled backward, eyeing the shadows lurking just beyond the light.
Lucy. Ethan. The stillness that followed pressed heavily against her eardrums.
There was no answer, only more shadows slithering from the corners of the room, a creeping darkness that seemed to have a mind of its own. "Clara," a soft hiss echoed, each syllable tearing at her resolve.
"Who is there?" she called, fierce yet trembling.
"I'm right here," the voice coiled within her, a sickly sweet caress wrapping around her throat. It was David's voice, but laced with something sinister.
"David!"
Her scream echoed off the walls.
"Where are you?" Shadows twisted, contorting into harrowing shapes that loomed and danced along the periphery.
Clara squinted, willing her eyes to adjust, but instead, the figures morphed, clawing towards her with elongated limbs that beckoned her into their gaping mouths.
"Help us!"
The plea spilled from their mouths, though the figures bore little resemblance to her children now. They were a grotesque parody, mockingly reflecting the love she held for them.
"Stop!"
Clara shrieked, the edge of her sanity fraying like an unraveled thread. She sprinted toward the flickering candles, desperate for the warmth to repel the shadows. Yet, with every step, that warmth receded, replaced by the bitter chill of despair that gnawed at her soul. "Mommy," the voice sounded like a siren, seductive and cruel, drawing her near.
"Stay with us." "No." I want tea.
Clara spat out, her breath coming quick and shallow.
She lunged toward the wall, hands frantically searching for anything to anchor her to reality. The key!
But as her fingers grazed the cool metal hanging from her neck, her vision exploded with blinding agony. Light splintered around her, the shadows screeching as if the very fabric of the realm was tearing. For a moment, she was suspended in a haze, the light forging an ethereal path that illuminated the frozen agony written across the morphing faces of her past.
Leave! Leave us!
They howled, a symphony of torment that twisted her heart into knots.
Never!
Clara cried, the key tightening in her grip as she dug deep, forcing herself to confront their despair. In that moment, clearer than ever, she understood, their pain could not hold her.
Not anymore.
I was your mother, but you are not my children. With a roar that ripped from her very core, she hurled the key against the ever-encroaching darkness. The air split apart dramatically. A shockwave of light rippled outward, crashing against the shadows like waves against a cliff. But in the upheaval, a hollow whisper cut through the vibrations, chilling her blood.
You think you're free? They're coming for you, Clara. Running will not save you.
The world stilled, leaving her hanging between terror and a shuddering relief. But an icy claw nestled deep in her stomach, the dread of what might still lurk just beneath her reached. She had banished the darkness, but it felt only like the calm before the storm. Will the darkness return, or will something far worse emerge from the shadows? Clara's heart raced as the weight of those unanswered questions loomed ahead, leaving her grasping for the truth amidst the impending terror. The ground shuddered beneath Clara's feet as the shadows wavered. They didn't retreat, not entirely. They pulsed like a living entity, lurking just beyond the flickering candlelight. A cold sensation crept over her skin, replacing the warmth of the light she'd conjured, as the whisper coalesced again.
Mommy, help us.
The words cut through the pounding of her heart like razor blades. Clara twisted, spiraling her thoughts into a panic. She had to leave. They were not her children anymore, but the fragments of their distress clawed at her conscience, straining her resolve. What if they truly needed her? What if the twisted images haunting her held a piece of the truth? Clara stumbled backward, her foot caught in the dark shrouding the edges. She felt the air grow denser, suffocating her. The weight of 1,000 unseen eyes bore down on her shoulders, and an inescapable instinct told her to look behind.
Turn around.
The voice was ugly, a torrent of desperate breaths straining through a throat too tight to scream. With a jerk, she whipped around. The shadows curled and receded, against her will, revealing a door at the far side of the room, ajar and beckoning.
It wasn't there before.
She took a step forward, the floor creaking as if warning her to stay away. Yet the pull was undeniable.
A chance?
Clara, please. For a moment, something in the air shifted.
A flicker of hope? Or was it another trick?
The childlike voice morphed into a growl, claws scratching behind her as they edged closer. Clara squeezed her eyes shut, focusing on the throbbing pulse of the candlelight. She could feel the flickering shadows at her back, moving with determination.
With a deep breath, she lunged for the door.
It swung open with a grating creak, revealing a narrow passage shrouded in darkness. She rushed inside, heart pounding, bolting toward the far end. The air turned thick, swirling, almost alive as the voices intensified, a collective wail of regret and longing. The door slammed shut behind her. Dark fingers grasped at her as she was swallowed by the dimness.
Clara's lungs constricted, panic rising like bile.
Somewhere in the suffocating black, there was a glimmer of faint light flickering, as if promising salvation. She grabbed for it, her hand brushing against a wall, cold and wet, her fingers leaving behind streaks of something thick. Breathing hard, she wiped her hand against her pants, eyes darting around until they landed on an ornate mirror hanging crookedly. Reflected in the glass, she could see them, her children's faces twisted in horror, contorted with rage and pain, broken remnants of what used to be. It wasn't just sorrow, it was accusation. Why did you leave us? They screamed silently, trapped within the reflective surface, mouths moving yet soundless. Clara recoiled, her heart racing, the weight in her stomach sinking deeper. A shudder ran through her. She felt drawn to them, to the reflection, a compulsion that dug claws into her resolve.
You're not them.
She pleaded softly, fighting against the flood of despair threatening to drown her.
As if acknowledging her word, the air thickened, and the mirror warped.
The edges of reality began to blur, twisting her reflection as the screams turned into ghastly laughter. Then, from the depths of that mocking chuckle, broke a voice far more sinister than before, low and chilling. "You can't hide from the truth, Clara, and we will always find you." With a burst of adrenaline, she spun away from the mirror just as the walls trembled, the passage shuddering as if the house itself was alive, angry. Clara raced forward, searching for an exit from the oppressive darkness, but something awful followed her, a whisper that crescendoed into a terrifying roar, reverberating off the walls, echoing through the air like an unholy chant. The shadow surged, and the doorway at the end of the passage threatened to close. She lunged to pass through just in time, colliding into another room, the scent of damp earth and decay flooding her senses. The door slammed shut behind her, locking whatever terror had pursued her.
Inside.
But a chilling realization set in as Clara turned to face her new surroundings. The room was lined with boxes, carefully stacked, each labeled with faded names, the names of people she once knew.
"What is this?"
she gasped, her heart plummeting as she reached for one dusty box, her fingers nimble yet shaky.
What had she unleashed? And would she be able to bear the truth hidden within?
As she lifted the lid, dark shadows danced at the edge of her vision, and a familiar sound broke the silence, a small laugh echoing through the gloom.
"Mommy, come play." What would Clara discover in the depths of mortality as secrets, and who awaited her on the other side of that haunting call? Clara's eyes widened as the box creaked open, the musty smell making her gag.
Inside lay a collection of items, worn toys, tattered clothes, a small shoe, each piece a reminder of lives once lived. The laughter echoed again, wrapping around her like a chilled blanket.
"Mommy, come play."
She turned, scanning the dark corners of the room, searching for the source. The oppressive air thickened, making it hard to breathe. Shadows rolled along the floor, slithering closer, whispering in hushed voices about forgotten games. Something in her stirred an urgency to leave. Yet, the presence of those names, etched into her mind like a curse, compelled her to dig deeper. Another name caught her eye, Jason.
Her youngest. The memory pierced her.
She remembered the way he would laugh, rolling on the floor, chasing the shadows around the living room before they grew darker, before she lost him forever.
Clara hesitated. What if the voices inside these boxes were echoes of the past? What if they were trapped memories begging for release?
Or were they malignant pieces of a twisted game? She glanced at the flickering light illuminating the room, the candle-less flame flickered, a stutter in its glow. The shadows danced more enthusiastically now, like specters celebrating her indecision.
Clara could feel the oppressive weight of eyes watching her, invisible and mocking. With trembling hands, she reached for the next box, this one labeled Sarah, her daughter.
The name felt heavy like a weight on her chest. She could almost hear her voice, sweet and innocent.
"I miss you, Mommy."
As she lifted the lid, the contents tumbled out. Choking back a sob, Clara gasped as a small doll rolled to a stop at her feet. Its porcelain face, cracked and weathered, bore an uncanny resemblance to Sarah. The vision of her lifeless body crept uninvited into Clara's mind, the gnawing regret flaring with fresh anguish. A cold draft swept through the room, chilling her resolve.
"Leave them alone,"
she shouted into the darkness, desperate for the playful haunts of childhood to remain untouched.
"Mommy, don't you want to play?"
The laughter returned, louder now, swirling around her, digging into her skin like needles. Clara's heart raced, her instincts screaming at her to run. Yet, the thought of stepping away from this reality, turning away from those who beckoned, terrified her more. She snapped her gaze to the door, half expecting it to burst open. But it remained shut, the darkness pressing in, forcing her toward the inevitable choice: confront the ghosts lurking in the boxes or succumb to the shadows. With dread pooling in her stomach, Clara turned back to the boxes, pacing among the stacks.
Each name felt like a taunt, an invitation to unlock secrets she buried. "What do you want?"
she whispered, her voice shaking.
"Join us." The air vibrated, a wave crashing against her, the voices now a cacophony of joy and sorrow.
They beckoned, teasing her to leave behind the pain, to embrace the darkness. The flickering light sputtered again, and for a brief moment, Clara thought she caught sight of fleeting shadows moving closer, figures, perhaps, pleading for her to reach out. She paused, her fingers hovering above another box, one that sent a frigid dread spiraling through her.
Mommy, look at me.
The laughter twisted into howls, a symphony of anguish clawing at the edges of her mind. Clara felt the tears streaming down her face, the regret pooling, threatening to drown her. She fought her instincts to recoil, gripping the box tightly.
If I open this, will it give me answers? Or just more pain?
The shadows converged as if waiting for her response. They danced closer, wrapping her in coils of despair, pressing down on her heart. She could almost hear them whispering the hidden truths, those terrible secrets she had avoided for so long. Lifting the lid, the contents spilled out: shiny trinkets, photographs, the very essence of hope and despair. What truth would those echoes reveal, and what monstrous revelation would she uncover lurking beneath the surface? The darkness trembled around her, waiting for an answer. Clara's pulse raced as she sifted through the contents, each object stirring forgotten memories deep within her chest. The weights of sorrow clanged against her, louder than the whispers swirling around her. Her fingers trembled over a tiny silver locket. Its delicate clasp broke open, revealing the faces of her children, wide-eyed and innocent, captured in a moment of joy long gone.
Mommy, look at me.
The laughter echoed once more, pulling at her heartstrings.
Clara felt the room pulse, shadows seeping closer as if drawn by her weakness.
Panic gripped her as she realized the stakes. Would they continue to haunt her, or could she break free of the chains binding her to this place?
Enough!
Clara shouted, voice defiant against the growing darkness. She slammed the locket back into the box, forcing herself to breathe. She couldn't succumb to the despair. She would not allow those shadows to erase her resolve.
You don't control me. The shadows recoiled, shrinking back in hesitation, but Clara could feel their anger bubbling beneath the surface.
The essence of her children lingered, a whisper tainting the air.
Join us. No! Clara shouted again, louder than before. You are not my children anymore. You are merely echoes of my fears.
Bracing herself, she gazed at the boxes stacked around her. They held memories, remnants of sorrow she had buried deep within. If she could confront the truth hidden in each one, perhaps she could banish the shadows for good. The key pulsed at her side, a lingering reminder of her choice, no longer just a means of escape but a tool to reclaim her own life. With renewed determination, Clara approached the next box, the one bearing the name Jason. Taking a deep breath, she lifted its lid with frail courage. Inside lay a mix of toys: an old teddy bear, once a friend to her little boy. She held it tightly, tears pooling in her eyes as memories flooded back.
Jason!
She sobbed, feeling his absence more profoundly than ever, the guilt threatening to crush her spirit.
Taking a steadying breath, she whispered, I'm sorry, my love.
I couldn't save you then, but I will save you now if it's the last thing I do. Light flickered. The shadows pulled back, their icy grip loosening slightly as if sensing her quiet strength.
Mommy, came a voice, softer now, almost pleading. I will not leave you behind.
She cried, her voice powerful and unwavering. With that proclamation, she pressed forward, repeating the process with each box, unraveling the darker truths, facing the pain of loss, embracing every moment of love, however bittersweet. With every item she uncovered, the shadows shrieked, retreating further into the corners of the room. Clara summoned memories of laughter, warmth, and fading echoes of love. You're not my past, but you are a part of me. The reverberation of her voice resonated against the walls, transforming from a whispering ode into a powerful declaration. The shadows writhed, twisting as if in pain. Finally, she reached the last box, the one marked Clara. Heart-pounding, Clara lifted the lid and was met with an avalanche of shattered dreams, letters, forgotten photographs, a journal filled with memories she had hidden away from herself. More than anything else, it was a reminder of who she was before the darkness had contaminated everything she loved.
I am more than this, she cried, lifting the journal high.
The shadows hissed and writhed, but she stood firm, embracing her identity. As she opened to the first page, the room filled with bright light, a purging force sweeping through the space as shadows dissolved into the ether. Leave! She shouted, heart swelling as her children's laughter echoed back to her, pure and untainted by fear. You do not own me. In the maelstrom of shadows swirling around her, she felt the presence of her children, not as twisted reflections but as loving spirits. With a final pulse of determination, Clara closed her eyes and thrust the journal forward.
Light erupted, washing away the darkness. When she opened her eyes again, Clara found herself standing in the quiet of the old house. The air still, the weight of anguish lifted. The boxes were gone, the shadows dissolved. The hallways felt clear and vibrant again, filled with the sunlight that streamed through dirty windows. Everything was alive once more. "Mommy!" Clara gasped, turning to see her children standing in the doorway, bright smiles lighting up their faces. "We're okay." "No," she whispered, panting, kneeling before them and enveloping them in her arms. Their warmth was a balm against her heart, a realization sweeping over her. They were finally safe. She wouldn't lose herself or them again. The door behind her creaked slightly, but she didn't turn. The burden of the past was resolved, hatred and fear had no power over her anymore. With her children by her side, she would forge a new path, a life woven from love and light. "Let us go home," she whispered to them, her voice trembling with hope. Together, they stepped out into the daylight, leaving the haunted echoes and shadows behind. And thus began their new chapter. As the screen fades to black, remember, you need to subscribe now to catch every exclusive story as we dive into the unknown. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm, you know it makes a difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about Clara's journey, your thoughts matter. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how hope prevails in the darkest of times. True fans know the importance of supporting our shared journey. Let's keep the stories alive.